mall where she plays a toy saxophone and gets a warm round of applause from the shoppers. Tragically, JONBENET would be murdered at Christmas, her happiest time of the year.
I got nightmares in my head, I fear thoughts build up until I can't feel. My mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science. Welcome back to the final part 3 of our analysis into the 6 warning signs where parents might be crossing the line with their child rearing. If you haven't watched part 1 and part 2 yet, I really suggest you check them out. I'll put a link in the description. And let's get started. Number 5. Where minors are affected, the law protects their identities. According to CNN, neither the parents nor their daughter can be identified, and that's based on an Australian law that seeks to protect child victims. Now, you might say it is in the interest of the community to protect the child victim, and I would say it is, especially in a case like this. But in a case where a minor is a perpetrator, that holds true as well. The courts feel it is in the interest of the community to protect young children. As a result of these protections, of course, a lot of the information about what really goes on behind closed doors remains secret. And so in a real sense, the court, despite its best efforts at the greater good, somehow assists in maintaining the shadowy taboos, in maintaining the cover-ups, in maintaining the shadow that clouds these sorts of cases. And that's why stranger abductions, which have so much information about them, because they've got no information limits. There's no restrictive laws against reporting on that. Well, they get a disproportionate and distorting share of the news when the real cases involving not strangers are hidden and protected by the law. And so people have a wrong sense of the proportions of these cases. And this is why, for example, when Hana Kobayashi went missing, one of the first things people thought was trafficking. The same pedophile abductor theory applied when 15-year-old Alison Chow went missing. Remember that case? In both those cases, thankfully, the young women were runaways, but that doesn't stop the pedophile abductor from being the default, the mainstream theory, when it shouldn't be. Thanks to all the misreporting, the distortions inherent in high-profile cases like the McCanns, the Ramseys, and in a sense, this Australian ballerina, where Australian law says you can't identify the people when family members are involved, the public really don't know how to think about these sorts of cases and the sort of different ways in which a child can be harmed, especially by people close to them. And that brings us to the 6th and final point, parents in denial. Perhaps the most disturbing aspect of all is the denial of the parents even when they have been found guilty, and in spite of their own child being so ill and near death that in this case she required hospitalization. According to CNN, it seemed that everyone in the world who had the opportunity to interact with this Australian ballerina understood that she was severely malnourished, except the 2 people who professed to love her. I simply cannot accept that you didn't see it. I simply cannot accept that you didn't notice it. That's what the judge in that case said. In fact, Judge Black found they did notice, so much so that Kate's father forged her birth certificate to make her seem 2 years younger, and partly to hide what was becoming increasingly apparent to other people. Their daughter was chronically malnourished. Now think about that, a forged birth certificate in this case. Isn't that a kind of narrative staging? You cover things up with words. And could that be an analogy for the ransom note? Obviously it's different, but it's kind of similar in a sense as well. What a beautiful photo of my ballerina princess, her father commented on one photo posted to Facebook of his daughter who looked far younger than her 14 years. This little girl's father worked full-time to provide for the family who lived in, this is also interesting, this family lived in one of the wealthiest suburbs of Perth, the capital of Western Australia. They were intelligent people who obviously knew how to feed themselves, the judge said, yet they failed to ensure their daughter ate enough food. Now think about that as an analogy, in a sense, to the poop narrative in the Ramsey case, where something as basic as clean underwear is something that doesn't seem to be there for JonBenet. As doctors tried to treat her, Kate's parents openly discussed their suspicions that a conspiracy was forming around them and that medical staff couldn't be trusted. In the Ramsey case, you have this conspiracy with Boulder police, that the police can't be trusted. And this also reminds me of the Ramseys initially blaming the housekeeper. Their daughter was in the eating disorder ward, yet they praised the figure of another patient who was dangerously thin. They told their daughter her stomach was looking full and made comments that suggested she might get fat if she followed a doctor's advice. Again, there's something similar, not quite the same, but similar to that with JonBenet not feeling comfortable eating McDonald's. This, in the context of the dire condition of your daughter, was outrageous, Black wrote. When the couple refused to allow doctors to insert a nasal tube to allow Kate to be fed and frustrated other attempts to treat her, authorities stepped in and put her in state custody. And then without her parents' intervention, Kate gained weight and they were then arrested and charged. Kate's parents didn't just prevent her from growing up, the court found. They told a cascading series of lies from 2016 about their daughter's age to cover up their neglect. Now, why was it necessary to cover anything up? Well, if anyone found out what was really happening in the Australian ballerina case, the parents could see prison time. And you know what? They did. They are. Judge Linda Black sentenced the father to 6.5 years in prison and the mother to 5 years, a reduced sentence to take into account her personal circumstances. Now, bear in mind, this little girl didn't die. Right, this little girl survived, and yet her parents got pretty heavy prison sentences. But as egregious as the sins of these Australian parents were, think about the sentences they received from the perspective of the victim, who after all is in a family relationship with them. This little girl said, "If my parents go to prison, I don't think I'll be able to cope." In a letter sent to the judge appealing to her to drop the prosecution, Kate, and remember that's not her real name, blamed herself for her parents' predicament, saying that they made her breakfast, lunch and dinner, but she chose how much she ate. "I'm fully dependent on my parents," she wrote. "All my living expenses are paid by my parents, including blah, 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 blah." Now, you may remember in JonBenet's case, when Judith's daughter went to visit her, she said that these are not, this is all my mother's idea, the whole pageant thing. My mother wants me to do this. These trophies really belong to her. And I think that really speaks volumes. The ballerina also said, "I love my parents very much. They are the most important people in my life. If my parents go to prison, I don't think I'll be able to cope." It makes you think, doesn't it? I'm not going to take it further than that. Look out for news on further coverage on this channel, and I'll see you guys next time.